Now that we have our completed timeline, we have all of our Firebase functions to give us all of a user's past and future posts. Let's head to our timeline page. So for our timeline, we're just going to have a continuous list of posts that we can scroll up and down. And to get our user's timeline, we'll need to pass down to timeline the current user. And again, as I mentioned, I prefer to use just a named argument. Actually, we need to go to home.dart. I prefer to pass down a named argument. So let's remove our raised button and uncomment timeline and add the same value as to upload current user. And then within timeline.dart, we'll create a final timeline variable of type, or rather, current user variable of type user. We'll pass that to the timeline constructor. We'll bring in our user model. And the way that we're going to fetch all of a user's timeline is within the initState method in timeline state, and we'll execute a function getTimeline. So for this getTimeline function, it'll be async. We want to await our timeline ref. So we need to create a timeline ref in home, pointing to our timeline collection. And get the timeline for the current user. So we'll select the document widget.currentUser.id, and here we'll make sure to import our home.dart file. We'll get the collection timeline posts, and as I mentioned earlier, I want to order it by timestamp in descending order to get the most recently created posts first, and then at the end called getDocuments. We'll store the result in a snapshot, type query snapshot, and we're going to iterate over a documents list, this time with map. You could also use for each, but I'm going to write this all in one line, and I'll use the post from document factory to deserialize our document, and then at the end convert it to a list, and we'll store this result in a variable called post that is a list of type post. And we'll set this list in state, and we'll give it the same name. So back within getTimeline, we'll set state and set this.post to posts. So now we're fetching our user's timeline, and in our scaffold, instead of having for the body a text widget, we're going to have a refresh indicator. This is going to enable the user to pull down on their feed in order to refresh it. So on refresh is going to be set to an arrow function where in the return we'll execute getTimeline to re-execute this function and get the latest posts, and the child will be the return value of a function called buildTimeline. And within buildTimeline we'll have a conditional. We'll check to see if, first of all, posts is null. If that's the case, we can return our circular progress to indicate loading. Otherwise, we're going to return a list view where we're going to set its children to our posts list. So let's save home and timeline, and we'll do a hot restart. And I believe for the current user they do not have a timeline. So we're going to take care of this completely in the next step, but for now we're just going to add the comparison, the conditional if post.isEmpty. If we have an empty array for our request, we're just going to return, for now, text widget that says no posts, otherwise we'll return our list view. And to resolve this issue, I'm going to follow another user who already has some posts. And once I do, I'll navigate back to my feed, and I immediately see their posts there. And since we added that refresh indicator, I can pull down to refresh and see if there are any new posts added. And whenever I make a change from here, from the feed, from the timeline I should say by liking a given post, if we go to that user's profile and check out their post, that like will be there as well.